here we are today with Jay Melugin, one of Pilot Point's leading citizens, one of the town's big historians, the founder of the North Texas Songwriters Festival, a songwriter himself, and we found out today a very fine visual artist. He's just a man of all trades, a true Renaissance man. Jay, how you doing today, bud?
Well, I'm getting along pretty good for an old fella.
You're not that old. Well, we're glad to see you getting around so good. The North Texas Songwriters Festival is coming up here in just a few weeks.
Yes, sir, it is. I'm really pleased about that. I have retired from that, and I'm no longer involved in the organization of it. But I'm still a big supporter, and I plan on going and volunteering and doing some work there this year. But I won't be spending much time on the stage announcing.
Well, you'll kind of be there all the time because they changed the name of it this year, as you know. What's it called now?
It's Jay Melugin Songwriters Festival.
Jay Melugin Songwriters Festival.
And I told them I didn't want them to do that, but I got outvoted.
Well, and rightfully so. Now, what year is this for the festival?
This will be year number 11.
Number 11,
Yes,
right.
sir.
I think I came in, got to be a little bit involved with about year 3 or 4.
Yeah, I think it was about year 4 when you started helping me announce
And
and
to set the record straight, I am not a songwriter. Nor am
but
I.
you have a terrific voice and stage presence, and you really added a lot to the show.
And I hope to help out a little bit this year. I've talked to Bo about that, and while like you, I'm not as able to spend as much time as I have in the past on it, but I do hope to be involved as well.
Right.
Tell me about that very first festival. It wasn't much of a festival back then, was it?
No, it was just kind of an extended jam session, sort of. I had just started writing songs and becoming involved with other songwriters around the area. And of course, a lot of them were playing in lowbrows, and that's how I met some of them. And I would meet one, and he'd tell me about another one. And then, anyway, I ended up, I thought, you know, I've got these 10, 15 friends that are all songwriters. Maybe we ought to put on a little show and showcase our music. So I talked to some of them about it, and I started out there was going to be 14 of us, and then a couple of the 14 told me, well, I've got a friend that, you know, or I know a guy. And so we ended up with 17 songwriters, including myself, so we had 16 other people. And it was a one-day show. We started at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, finished up about 8 at night.
And this was at Lowbrows, right?
No, it was at the Opera House.
Oh, it was at the Opera House.
Yeah.
For those who aren't from Pilot Point, Lowbrows is a local bar, the local bar, I guess you could say,
Yes.
where we have live music just about every weekend. And the Opera House is the building right across the street where it's a multi-purpose venue. The Garage Door Theater is located there, and which Jay was instrumental in helping get that started too.
We came up with the idea that we wanted to start the Opera House as an entertainment venue for the arts, for plays and musicals and concerts. First song I wrote was called The Midnight Woman, and it was a song about a girl that I met at Lowbrow's bar, supposedly. It's kind of a fantasy, but that was the first song I wrote. Actually, I walked out of the cafe. Cafe was right across the square. Mm-hmm. And every day when I'd get finished up about 4 o'clock or so, I'd walk out of the cafe and just walk across the street to Lowbrow's and get me a beer. And I was walking across the street, and this tune just kind of came in my head. And then this really nice looking woman drove by in this car, and that's kind of inspired the song. And we ended up going to Lowbrow's and talking a little bit, and so I ended up writing that song about her, kind of. But it was not a true story. Everybody wants to know who she was, but she was just a lady that was just passing through town.
I see. Yeah, sometimes the best stories are the ones that aren't true.
Well, it's hard to say, but I wrote a kind of a folk ballad. And as you mentioned, I'm the city historian for Pilot Point, and I have written 2 books on Pilot Point history, which includes all the characters who contributed to making the town. And so one day I just sat down and I was on my way out to the cemetery, because as it turns out, all these old founders and stuff of Pilot Point were all out there at the cemetery. And I went out there and was finding their graves and looking around. And I noticed that nobody had put flowers on any of them's graves, because they didn't have any family still living or left around here. So I went down to the dollar store and bought me about $30 worth of artificial flowers, and I went out there and started putting them on the graves of these various ones. Well, that kind of started me out with my passion for the Pilot Point Cemetery, combined with my passion for history. And so one day I was on my way out to the cemetery to put some flowers out, and this tune just came in my head, and I said, I'm going out to the cemetery where them old timers are buried. Some of them have been there 100 years. In that old cemetery, out there on the prairie, I find peace and solitude to quiet my fears. And it started with that verse. And then I started writing individual verses about the different people. And I was very good friends with this songwriter, this girl. Her name is Miriam Gray. I don't know if you remember her or not, but she used to live here. And she was probably one of the very first songwriters I ever knew, and influenced me quite a bit. And so I was writing that song, and I played it for her. I wanted her to hear it. And it was just verse after verse after verse after verse. And she said, well, you need a kind of a chorus in there to break that up, in between. So she said something like, in that old cemetery, that old cemetery, and I said, well, yeah, you're right. So I went back and I wrote a chorus to it. And it's kind of a folk ballad about Pilot Point history. And I guess that's probably about my favorite song. Nobody ever asked to hear it, so they always want to hear the Midnight Woman. They always want to hear the song about whiskey and drinking.
That seems like there's a butterfly song that everybody has for.
Clifton Irie, who died a couple of years ago at the age of 94. And he taught me just about everything I know about Pilot Point history. And when he passed on, he left his collection to me of Pilot Point documents and photographs and historical essays. And it's quite extensive. So I contacted the city, and he had just previously given this building to the city in hopes that they would make it into a museum someday. So I contacted the city and told them I had all of his stuff, plus I had a pretty good collection on my own, and I told them I'd be willing to donate all of that if they'd make that into a museum and name it after Mr. Irie. And so we did that, and had to go through some legal stuff and sign in papers and stuff, but I have an office. A lot of the streets were named for the different founders and people who contributed to Pilot Point history. And I started a third book, and it's The Origin of the Streets of Pilot Point.
Wow.
And it tells you what each street was named, who it was named for, and why it was named for that person. I never did finish that one. That's still a work in progress.
Well, let's hope you finish it soon,
Yeah.
so we can all read it and find out more about the
Oh,
history
yeah.
of our little town out here.
Forces who came to keep law and order, keep all these rebels in line, and it was a jail. And it served as a jail for about 3 years, and then the military pulled out, and when they did, then it became the local constable's office. And it's a very interesting historical building. It's probably the oldest masonry building in Pilot Point. I can't think of anything else that would predate 1867. Well, it was it's the highest point in this part of Denton County. And when people were going west with their covered wagons and so forth, they had to have trail markers along the way. And you could see the hill where Pilot Point was from a great distance because it stood out over the prairie. You could see quite a bit. And it just so happens that where Pilot Point Hill was, right down below it was the Trinity River. And you had to cross the Trinity River in order to continue west. And Pilot Point was the best crossing. So they made this into a landmark for the old wagon masters who were called pilots, like airplane pilot or pilot. And so the pilots of the wagon trains nicknamed it Pilot's Point with an apostrophe S. And then later on, a few years later, people started settling here because there was fresh water and lots of plentiful game and Trinity River right there. And so it became kind of an outpost for people traveling to the west. And a lot of them, by the time they got to Pilot Point, they was tired, they was ready to settle down, so they just stayed here because it was such a nice location. The soil and the weather and all of that. And then in 1872, they dropped the apostrophe S and just named it Pilot Point.
And there was talk about making it the seat of Denton County for a
It
time.
was originally laid out to be the seat of Denton County, but the state of Texas passed a law in the 1850s that the county seat of a county had to be located in the geographical center of that county. And so there was the geographical center of Denton County wasn't nothing but a creek and a mud bog. And so they went in and laid out the town of Denton and made it the county seat. But that's why Denton's county seat, because it's the geographical center of Denton County.
Artists.
I've had some 10-year-olds that have performed. There's a young man the last couple of years that wrote songs, and then there was a young lady about 4 or 5 years ago that played and wrote songs. And this year we have a new performer that's 10 years old, and he's written some fantastic songs. And he has some videos on YouTube that are just fantastic. I'm really anxious to see him play. And then we've had him on up to age 80. So, and they're everywhere in between. And every type of music. We've had folk music and gospel music and rock and roll and country music and jazz. So that the radio station was kind of what gave me the idea and connected me with all the Texas music songwriters, was having the radio station. And it lasted for about 5 years. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed doing that. But the main thing about it was diverse.
Yes.
There was, you just didn't know, like I said, when you turned into it, you didn't know what I might play next.
It was a lot of fun. I miss it. The closest thing we have to it now would be like KNON out of Dallas.
Yes, KNON is a good one.
Yes, and the KER station is not 90.1. They
Right.
kind of have that same spirit about letting everybody be heard.
Right.
Yes, and that's what's cool about the Songwriters Festival.
That's what I wanted when I started it. I thought that we're not going to exclude anybody. This is not going to be exclusive, and it's going to be inclusive. And I ran it for 10 years, and I never turned anybody away. I always figured out a way to add one more.
And I can only remember one time when you ever stopped a performer when this performer was doing a song that wasn't his. He was doing a popular song, and you came up there and said, "No, that's not what this thing is about."
That's the only time that ever happened was this one guy, and he was a songwriter. I knew him.
Oh, and he's been back.
Yeah, I heard him perform before, but the Old Crow Medicine Show song "Wagon Wheel," which everybody in the world performed as a cover song. He got up there on the stage and started singing that, and that just was too much. I had to get up and go up there and pull him off stage.
And as I recall, he was cool about it.
He was.
And
He apologized. He said he knew he was supposed to do original songs, but he just said, everybody likes this one so much. And
I think he had been across the street at Lowbrow's playing before, and probably having a little bit of the other Lowbrow's
Probably,
spirits, and just let the spirit of the thing get away from him. And that's another cool thing about the Songwriters Festival, since it's at the Opera House, and believe me, this is like a one-lane street between the Opera House and Lowbrow's. The musicians, when they finish on stage there, they go across the street. A lot of times, if the weather's good, they're playing outside, and
sometimes the jam sessions that they've had over Lowbrow's after hours, after the show closed, has been some of the best music I've ever heard.
yeah.
I had this kind of a punk rock group that was there for the first 2 years, and he wrote for the guy that wrote all the songs for this punk rock band. Of course, I'd seen them play and I'd heard them, but I didn't think it, I didn't know how that was going to work. And I told him, I said, it can't be your band. I'm not hiring your band to play. I'm wanting you to. I said, you wrote those songs, right? And he said, yeah. And I said, when you wrote them, did you have a whole band sitting around with you? He said, no. I said, how'd you write them? He said, well, I was just sitting on the front porch with my guitar and I wrote them like that. And I said, that's the way I want you to play them. And he did. And about 14, 15 months after, they were pretty big in Dallas. The name of the group was Opium Symphony. And they were really pretty good, pretty big in Dallas, and they got a recording contract and went out to LA.
Well,
And I still hear from Kevin every now and then. They're still. Well, as little as possible. I'm considering to taking up oil painting again, and just kind of as a sideline, and just so I have something to do. My health has not been real good. A couple of years ago I had a light stroke and my mobility has been real poor. I don't get around like I did before. And for a while my speech was affected and I wasn't able to sing, which I still never could sing, but I mean, I sung worse after that. But I've been taking speech therapy now for over a year, and my clarity and diction and projection have really, really improved. If I'd have been talking to you a year and a half ago, you probably wouldn't be able to hear me.
yeah.
But it's getting a lot better, so I'm working on my health. I'm in a physical therapy class, I'm in a speech therapy class, and that takes up quite a bit of my time.
I want to turn this down a dark path, but we both lost a friend this last year who was also very instrumental in the Songwriters Festival and the spirit of Pilot Point, and that's Bob.
Yeah. Yeah, Bob was one of my best friends. He owned Lowbrows. And
What's Bob's last name?
Albrook.
Bob Albrecht, yes.
And when he first bought the building, I thought the building was going to have to be torn down because it was in terrible condition. But Bob had a talent for restoring old buildings. And it took him a couple of years, but he got it going. And my business was right across the street, so just every day or two I'd go over there and harass him a little bit and see what he was doing. And he found some artifacts there in that building. That building used to be the Pilot Point Post Signal back at the turn of the big 1900. And he found some artifacts over there when he was restoring, which he turned over to me and now are in the museum. And Bob was, he was very interested in me because I knew so much about the history. He was really interested in the history. And then when I wrote that song, Midnight Woman, my very first song. I wrote it sitting at the table in his bar. And I walked in, I said, give me a pencil and paper, Bob, I gotta get this on paper. And he did, and a few minutes later I sang a little of it for him, and I said, what do you think? And he said, I think you got a good one. Okay. Yeah, I love Bob a lot. He was a big supporter of the Songwriters Festival every year. He'd give me money if I needed money, to buy advertising or pay for t-shirts or whatever. And he also was the reason I quit smoking cigarettes, because he asked me one day, he said, I'm thinking about making the bar non-smoking, what do you think? And I said, well, I think that's the trend, I think that's a good idea. And I said, well, what are me and you going to do? And he said, we're going to quit smoking. And I said, well, I've tried to quit smoking, Bob, and it's real hard. And he said, well, I've been taking this pills called Shantix that helps you, makes it easier. But he said it's real expensive. And I said, well, let me know how it works out for you. And I said, I don't have any money to spend on. I said, all my money goes for cigarettes, so I can't really afford the pills. And I said, how much is a prescription of it to get started? He said, well, the first month is $300. And he said, it gets cheaper after that. He said, second month you get a refill that's only $150. And I said, well, it'll be a while before I can afford that. And he opened up his billfold and pulled out $300 bills and handed them to me. And he said, go get that prescription. And I did, and I quit smoking. It's been 3 years ago. And anybody that's out there that smokes, let me tell you, you don't want to be in that condition. I've been there.
I wish Bob had met my mom. Smoking is what.